Yeah, what I don't think people recognize, I mean, people who have a conspiratorial style of explaining anomalies don't tend to recognize that their explanations don't actually run through. I mean, there's no plausible background set of incentives that could explain a given conspiracy coming together. I mean, so you take, like the 9/11 truth conspiracy as an analogy. You talk to conspiracy-minded people on that topic, and they'll just toss off one claim after another without acknowledging the truly insurmountable obstacles around getting people whose incentives are not perfectly aligned to collaborate in such an awful project, right? So, like, who rigged the Twin Towers to explode, right? Like,
Hmm.
just how many hours does it take to go into those buildings unobserved and rig them to explode, right? And, how do you get hundreds or thousands of people to collaborate in that project of murdering their neighbors on a bright fall morning and then never breathe a word of it afterwards? I mean, no one feels guilty. No one divorced their husband and then spilled the beans. I mean, it's just perfect silence, perfect collaboration. And so it is with many conspiracies that get alleged in this context, right? I mean, just like the influence of big pharma. The truth is, there is absolutely no conspiratorial explanation for what you and I are doing on this podcast. Right? There's no connect. Like yeah, I've got no connection to big pharma. I will criticize big
Right.
pharma in the next podcast on another topic.
Right.
With absolute freedom. I've got no fear of YouTube demonetizing me. I mean, it's just I'm completely free, and I'm doing exactly what I want, and
Hey,
you're the person I wanted to do it with, and this is what we're doing.
right.
Right?
And as you know, Sam, my career almost ended back in 2004, 2005 because I took on Merck about
Right.
Vioxx. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
I am the least person in the world that's pro pharma. Okay, and I've taken big risks about taking them on, and I still am during the pandemic. So no, we're trying to play this thing straight. We're trying to go with what is the body of evidence that is extraordinary. We are in a momentous time in life science where we learned how to, develop vaccines in at scale in a time velocity that no one could ever have imagined. And to basically end the pandemic, we could have, had we been able to get vaccines widely distributed throughout the world,
Mm.
potent vaccines throughout the world early on, the pandemic would essentially be over now. Okay, we wouldn't have a Delta variant. We wouldn't even have Beta and Gamma, right? We probably would have just been able to arrest it largely and contain it at the alpha stage. The problem is though we aren't able to make the vaccines at for 7+ billion people, right? Not fast
Mm.
enough. But the other problem is in the United States, which is far worse than any other place that I know of in the world. We have a very significant proportion of these anti-vaxxers, conspiracy theorists, anti-science. I mean, this started, of course, before the
Yeah.
pandemic, but it's been, gone much higher levels. So we are not reaping the advantages and the protection here that we could. And have to say, I was really looking forward to the summer, this time of year, because I thought, you know what, we could get right back to pre-COVID life. I could stop having to put my attention on COVID and get it back to the things that I much
Mm.
more enjoy. And basically, it's been screwed up because of Delta. It's now going to last a lot longer. We'll get through Delta. It'll take a couple of months. We'll get over this wave. But the toll it will take on the deaths, on the hospitalizations, and particularly the large number of cases we're going to see with long COVID, that was unnecessary had we not had so much resistance and hesitancy and anti-vaccine for the people who will be part of the protection
Right.
instead of part of the liability and vulnerability group.
Right. Right. Okay. So let's conclude on some recommendations or confessions of uncertainty about what we should do going forward before we talk about vaccine mandates and related matters. What's taking so long with the full FDA authorization of the vaccines? Why is that not already accomplished?
Yeah, well, I've been pushing hard on that. As you saw, I had a New York Times op-ed a few weeks ago, and prior to that, trying to get Dr. Woodcock, who's the acting commissioner, to come out and talk to us, tell us what is going on. So I know the former FDA commissioners well. Some of them, a few of them I've spoken to at some length about this. And as you know, I've been on several FDA advisory committees over the years. So I know the workings and I understand what's happened here is that the usual so-called biologic licensing application, that's the full approval. That is 100,000 plus pages of documents. It requires plant inspections. It's not just the clinical trials. It's not just does the vaccine work and is it safe? It's more than that. But in this case, because of this pandemic crisis, back in December, when the mRNA vaccines were given their emergency authorization, the company started submitting, packet by packet to get FDA review. And so we've had 7 months since that time for the FDA to have completed their review. And indeed, in speaking to FDA commissioners, they believe it should have been done by now. Okay? In fact, it should have been done in June at the latest.
Okay, Eric, I'm going to talk about what you're bringing up here because you're missing the key element in it. And I think you're not going to be able to talk about this at all unless you get this element in your discussion. And that is, you have to understand that Pfizer does not want Comirnaty to be approved in the United States. It's already approved in other places. Australians get Comirnaty. Did you know that? Okay. Now, let me explain something. When a vaccine becomes a commercial product like Comirnaty as opposed to an emergency product like the one that's under the designation of being an emergency use authorized product, it loses its blanket immunity. They don't want to have Comirnaty because they won't get the benefit of having the protection afforded to emergency use authorization products. Is that crystal clear? So Pfizer is going to drag their feet as much as possible. Not in Australia or maybe in Europe, I don't know, but certainly they're going to drag their feet in the United States. Until you understand that and know the reason why, you're not going to be able to discuss the effort and the timing of getting the Pfizer vaccine approved as Comirnaty. Now, Pfizer has told everyone over and over and over again that the Comirnaty product and the EUA product are exactly the same. So don't worry, public. You're getting the same quality vaccine. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too, in other words. In other words, they want the public to think they're precisely the same, but they don't want to give the public Comirnaty because they would be they would carry the liability risk if something happens, like patients die or they get huge clots in their ventricles or they get transverse myelitis from it or whatever the case may be, multiple sclerosis, Guillain-Barré, etc. So that's the problem with not getting Comirnaty, quote unquote, approved in the U.S. And you should think deeply about that if it isn't obvious. Now, because I can promise you, with the extra sales they would make if it was Comirnaty versus an EUA product, they would gladly get the paperwork done and very quickly if they weren't worried about the liability issue, because they know it would sell more. So without knowing that issue, you're not going to be able to discuss with Dr. Woodcock or whoever it was why it's taking so long to get the FDA approval of Comirnaty. They don't want it approved. Okay. Now, okay, is that clear? Let's move on to the next issue.
Yes. And we now have heard just last week from Dr. Woodcock that this could take till January. Well, we can't wait till January. This should have been done. Now, there is no excuse except that this is not the number one priority. And as you saw, there was an Alzheimer's drug that was approved, highly irregular, concurrent with this. And so it's really unfortunate. We do not have an FDA that's functioning at the level it needs to in the midst of this pandemic, especially as the U.S. is confronting this very formidable version of the virus.
Yeah, and in defense of the people who are worried about the quality of our information, the truth is we need institutions we can rely on, and it's pretty clear we don't quite have them. I mean, the FDA, the WHO, the CDC, all of them have at various moments covered themselves in embarrassment in the last 18 months. So, that's, again, there's a rational way to understand that, and then there's the paranoid way to exaggerate the nature of that problem. But
Exactly.
we do need a rebooting of our institutions here, and there's no question. What do you think we should do around requiring vaccination in the public or private sector in various contexts? So, mandates in schools or hospitals or businesses or for travel. I mean, what are your thoughts about
Yeah,
that?
it's really tied in, Sam, to the question you just asked about the full approval, because general counsel of our health system, and if you talk to private large companies, municipalities, even though there have been some that have said, like for example, at the University of California, you have to be vaccinated, you can't come on campus, you can't be a student, you can't be on the faculty. But that's the rarity right now. The day that we get full approval, which should have happened by now, all these things open up and there will be a requirement for vaccination, or there'll be accommodations for those who don't want to get vaccinated. You have to wear a mask at all times at work, and you have to get tested on a frequent basis. And I would submit to you that the people that opt for the non-vaccination after a couple of weeks, they're not going to want to go through all that, and they'll go ahead and get vaccinated. So I actually think tens of millions of Americans, soon after full approval, will be required to be vaccinated or will be given an option that is unpalatable.
Yeah, I mean, we should acknowledge that there are some people who actually can't get vaccinated. I mean, there are people in various stages of cancer treatment, I believe, and there are people who just have weird immune systems who go into anaphylaxis over vaccines that are as benign as possible. And so, herd immunity is the only way to protect those people because they can't get vaccinated. And under any regime where vaccines are required, there would still be a medical exemption for certain people, right?
Yes, yes. But those same people want to have protection with masks. They want to have protection from, like, for example, if they did get infected from testing, they were found to, they want to get monoclonal antibodies to the virus as soon as possible because they don't have an intact immune system. So, yes, you're absolutely right. Some people can't get vaccinated. It's very rare, but for them, that same option of masks and frequent testing is part of their defense. If we didn't have the anti-force, we would have passports, right? We would know that you had an option. Either you had your vaccination digital proof, or you had a rapid antigen test very soon around that time. You had proof that you're good to go, whether it's to a restaurant or to work or on a trip, on a plane, whatever. We are against passports in this country, just like we've had the anti-force against masks and and vaccines and stay at home when things were really rough. And so that's unfortunate, but several countries, as you know, are adopting the passport system, and it's working well. I mean, they're there are countries like in Denmark, they rely heavily on rapid antigen tests. And while they're getting their vaccinations up to the highest level, it's working extremely well for suppressing infections and many other places as well. So we aren't taking advantage of the rapid testing side, which we should. I mean, a lot of these companies are U.S. companies, but that's another misfire. I wish we could do that. It would help the situation we're in right now.
Eric, I want to talk to you about vaccine passports, which are a horrible idea. And let me explain why. And then I want to say something about these universities that are requiring their students to get vaccinated before they can come back to the campus. Because vaccination does not lead to herd immunity. I mean, the vaccines don't even block transmission, for God's sakes. And nobody's a member of the herd that's gotten vaccinated, because they can transmit it to the next person just like they could before they got vaccinated. So forget about that crazy idea. Now let me talk about vaccine passports. When vaccine passports exist, you're giving the government too much control over you. They can, imagine this, you forgot to get your latest booster for COVID. So you get a message on your phone that says, Dr. Topol, please get the latest booster on COVID. We understand that you haven't gotten it yet. And by the way, we have canceled your flight to Vermont to take your wife skiing for your 30th anniversary next week because you have neglected to stay up to date on your vaccines. And by the way, your grandson, who's getting ready to matriculate at UCLA, also needs to get up to date or he cannot matriculate. Now, do you want the government to have control over you like that? Seriously. You don't want that, okay? They can also put pressure on you in many other ways as well. They can control how you spend money. They can tell you you cannot go to a restaurant where you've made a reservation because that restaurant requires everyone to be up to date on their vaccines. And on and on and on. Vaccine passports are a horrible idea. It gives them total control over where you go, how you spend your money, what you spend it on, what your children and grandchildren spend their money on. It is a horrible idea. You're saying that it's working well in other countries. Well, I'm shocked to hear that. I don't know what your basis for claiming something like that is. I'm glad that the American people had enough courage to reject fully vaccine passports when it was proposed and almost forced upon us a few years ago. There's no way that's a good idea. Vaccine mandates are also a very bad idea. If you want to politicize vaccines, you institute mandates. Now, the other thing that has not been mentioned in your podcast with Sam is this whole issue of universities requiring students, well, you have mentioned it, universities requiring students to get vaccinated before they come back to campus. Are they, do they have blanket immunity against the student who gets Guillain-Barré syndrome and paralyzed because of the vaccine, which you say is very rare? I know it's rare, but it's not zero. And some people are going to get sick from the vaccines. Now, you'll always be able to claim that it wasn't the vaccine that did it, and then of course there'd be a big court case over it. But something's got to give somewhere. I'm being a little bit having trouble getting out my thoughts and feelings here because it's late, and I've been on this podcast for a long time doing the reaction video, and I'm also very sick. But I do want to make you and Sam understand that this government control over people, their ability to live life the way they want to, their freedom, can easily be limited in a very bad way by things like vaccine passports. And I don't know if you are in favor of these kind of limitations on people. Remember, if the vaccines work, all you have to do is protect yourself from some child in the class that's not vaccinated, for example, when it comes to children's vaccine schedules. I think it's a very bad idea, and we could debate that issue alone. Anyway, I wanted to thank you and Sam for doing your original discussion on these. Thank you, Sam, also. But I will be stopping here as soon as you and Sam thank each other and so forth. I feel like I have proved everything that I said that's obviously differs from what you guys have said. If you don't think I've proved it sufficiently, let me know in the comments and I will add to it. But thank you to the people who have tuned in and watched this podcast, and I would like to do more. I'm certainly going to find videos that make claims that don't make any sense and do reaction videos to them. I know that Sam has a few others that I want to react to. But thanks again, and I hope I see you guys both down the road somewhere. And thanks again, and I'll let Sam thank you, and then I'll thank the viewers.
Well, Eric, I mean, to my ear, I feel like we've covered it. I'm sure not to the satisfaction of the people who are unpersuadable, but is there anything else left to be said, in your view, on this topic?
Well, I just think when we go forward years from now, well after this pandemic is over, and hopefully we'll be at a time when we can really be reflective, we'll think about this momentous science and medical advance of vaccines, and the extraordinary proof track record of potent efficacy, safety. And we'll wonder what happened. Why did the U.S., who failed as a country in the early part of the pandemic, with, as you said, 600,000 and more deaths still, why did they not become the world model for blocking the virus's harm? And I think a lot of things we discussed today, Sam, will be written about for years to come, because we had the potential to just show the world that we could build the Delta wall of immunity, whether it be from the vaccines or, as you mentioned, the 100 million plus people who had prior COVID had some natural immunity. How did we botch it up? How did we become as vulnerable as we are right now and in the weeks to come? It's really unfortunate. And I maybe after all of this, we'll have a movement back to being data-driven, evidence-based, and not allow for the misinformation to propagate, which something that should be emphasized. We know that the misinformation gets spread far better than truth, right? That's been documented. So maybe out of all this, it won't happen now, but in the years ahead, we can get back to where we were in the old days when the polio vaccine was being rolled out and all the other ones since then.
Yeah. As always, Eric, thank you for your wise counsel and your time. I look forward to the next occasion. We'll talk about a happier topic. We'll talk about human health somehow, rather than our needless misadventures and own goals around disease. But until then, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam. Real pleasure. I look forward to the next chance that we get to talk.
Okay, thank you to the viewers, and I know this thing was terribly long, but I'll learn how to shorten them a little bit. It's just that the number of people that well, let's put it this way, the number of false statements that were made required me to jump in an awful lot, and it was a little bit repetitive, but I do think people learned a lot. And once again, thank you for tuning in. And I'm sorry for my illness that held me up a little bit, but I will see everyone down the road. And thank you very much for tuning in. And please do look at my book. I hope that that you can learn all about what really happened to people during COVID. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.